morning, and thank you for joining us for fundraising during a time of crisis. This is one of our TCF forums. You will be seeing more of these hitting your inboxes, so stay tuned for that. Today, we have a very exciting program planned for you, but I'd like to cover a few housekeeping tips just to so you know what's going on. First, I'd like to mention that we have a moderated panel today, but we also have a Q&A section coming up. You are welcome to enter your questions into the Q&A section at any point during the forum. We will be keeping an eye on that section, but we will not be monitoring the chat box, so please don't enter your questions there. We will check the chat box occasionally if you have audio problems or anything like that. You can leave those messages there, but questions would be better in the Q&A. You can also upvote questions that you see there that you would like to have answered, and that'll be a great way for us to know where to focus during our Q&A section. I also want you to know that this audio and this webinar is being recorded. That is great because that means that this recording will be accessible to you after the video. Be sure to hop on over to our Eventbrite and make sure that you're registered there. Your email address will be collected and we can send this recording out to you along with a survey for our nonprofit forum after this is over. We have two interpreters here with us today, and I want to make sure that you know that they're there and how to keep them on your screen for the entire forum. If you would like to see the interpreters for the whole forum, you would need to go to the top of each of their boxes, look for the three dots in the top right-hand corner, click on those and pin both of those to your screen. They will stay there for the duration of the broadcast. In addition, we also have closed captioning available to you. And in order to access the closed captioning, you would need to go to the bottom of your screen. If you go there, you'll see where it says closed captioning, and you click on that, and you can click where it says view subtitles. If you have any other questions about this would be a good thing to add into the chat box, and we will keep that monitored to answer those questions. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Oyauma Garrison, President and CEO of A Kid Again. Next, we have Jessica Wichtman-Will, Director of Engagement at Ywca. Next, we have Adam Fazio, Director of Development for Local Matters. And last but not least, we have Steve Moore, Community Counsel and Director for Donor Services for the Columbus Foundation. And moderating for us today, we have Jonica Armstrong, Corporate Philanthropy Manager for Big Lots. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonica and she'll begin the questions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. To chat and learn and hear from some fantastic representatives that we have from nonprofit organizations. And I'm going to let them first start by sharing a little bit about their organization and also their most recent virtual fundraisers. I'm going to kick it over to Jessica first.
Thanks for having me. So Ywca Columbus, our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. But most of all, here in Columbus, we believe that every person deserves to be treated with dignity. So over the past 7 months, every part of our program has been hit with change, as we all have, right? And we have been weathering the storm of the pandemic while providing shelter for women and families, standing up pandemic childcare for programs for our residents and staff, and advocating for social justice. All very important things. And as far as events, we've now successfully completed, as of last week, 2 virtual events. One more probably widely known is our Women of Achievement event that took place on August 12th. And then last week on Wednesday the 14th, we just successfully completed Activists and Agitators virtually. So both went really well.
Awesome, thank you, Jessica. Now I'll kick it over to Adam.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Adam Fazio, Director of Development at Local Matters. And for those who aren't familiar, Local Matters is a healthy food education, access, and advocacy organization headquartered here in Central Ohio with a mission to create healthier communities through food education, access, and advocacy. And we do that work reaching over 20,000 people a year with hands-on programs and food access, fresh food access in neighborhoods where those items might be limited. During the pandemic, we've responded with virtual programming and significantly increasing the availability of fresh foods in neighborhoods where those items are limited. And our recent virtual event was called Harvest Ball at Home. It was a virtual version of our previous fundraising event, Harvest Ball, and that's normally a cocktail party, but we did it as a cook-along celebration. So we actually had 150 households across the city and across the country cooking together and learning more about food and the role of food in our communities and what we can do to build a stronger, more equitable food system for ourselves and for our community.
Awesome, thank you, Adam. And then Oyauma.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Oyauma Garrison. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president and CEO for A Kid Again. A Kid Again, we are in our 25th year in celebrating the opportunities to provide hope, happiness, and healing for families who are raising a child battling some level of a life-threatening condition. And it has been an absolute incredible journey, as I'm sure everyone else will attest to this past year, having to be able to pivot. When we initially had our gala slated for the month of May, we ended up pivoting and going to the month of August. And we really didn't make the call that we were going to go virtual until the beginning of June. So we were still planning for some level of a hybrid for our gala. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I will tell you that the night of was an absolutely incredible success for our organization. We actually raised more money that evening than we had previously at the live event back in 2019. So lots of great energy. And then we also used that same template. We had an incredible team that helped build all of that out. And we used that same template for one of our chapters to launch their virtual gala as well. Tremendous success. So thank you.
Perfect, thank you for sharing, team. I'm now gonna move to Stephen Moore, who we have on the phone. Will you talk a little bit anecdotally about how you've seen donors respond to virtual events and giving during the pandemic in general?
Good morning. My name's Steve Moore. I'm the Community Counsel for the Columbus Foundation. Happy to be here and so appreciative for everyone who signed on to view this webinar. We serve as a community foundation for Central Ohio, and our mission is a simple one, to assist donors and others in strengthening and improving our community for the benefit of all of its residents. I want to just mirror a comment made by Mike Geiger, who's the president and CEO of AFP, National AFP. And that's a very simple comment of don't stop. This is a challenging time, but you can't stop doing your activities. And even if data, which isn't fully out, but some data has shown an uptick in second quarter fundraising, it certainly doesn't feel that way. And creating an energy and an environment that encourages your staff and your board to continue to fundraise and pivot as necessary is so very important. My anecdotal comments are generally that the events that I've seen, while not the same as in live events, have been able to create some of the same emotional connection, some of the same sort of mission-driven messaging that you might do in person. And I continue to find this as a tool that organizations will continue to use even once we move past the pandemic. Thank you, Jonica.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect segue to talk a little bit about marketing a virtual event. So, times are different. We have to use technology, which we will, obviously talk about a little bit later. But what do you think are some of the best ways to engage donors during this time of crisis? So I want to hear from our nonprofits. So obviously you had to pivot. So that's going to be our buzzword, and we probably should have made that the word of the day. But with you pivoting, what were the key things that you had to do to actually engage donors during this pandemic? And anyone can jump in.
So I'll start. We used our network. So we have almost 30 board members, we have committee members, et cetera. So we used them and asked them to use, we would provide them with sample social media, email content, et cetera, and, share our events with their network. Also, social media is huge. We have a very talented senior communication strategist who knows her social media world, and she lots of posts. Also reaching out to get earned media, that was helpful as well.
Awesome, great, thank you.
So much like Jessica and the team over at the Y, one of the things that I'll say is we have an incredible team here at A Kid Again. And with our COO, Jen, and our marketing director, Kevin, a lot of it was, how do we make sure that we can keep the mission forward in our communications, and how can we make it easy? I mean, everybody wants an easy button. So how can we make it easier for our board members and for our host committee members, our staff members, our tremendous amount of volunteers and supporters to be able to help us get the word out? And emails absolutely still work today. Social media, keeping the information out there on the forefront. But there is this other thing called the phone, and our ability to actually pick it up and smile and dial. And that was one of the things that we did too. And it actually proved to be very beneficial, because we can have a conversation with people and we can talk with them about what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it would be so important to still have them engage with us on in August when we actually executed the event.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I will echo what my colleagues here have said. It's really been about sharing stories about ways people can connect with the work and connect with the community, because I think that is really something that so many people are lacking right now, with all of us working remotely and being at home. That feeling of isolation is really difficult, and that feeling of helplessness is really difficult. And so giving people an opportunity to really engage with something meaningful and hear the stories about their potential impact is really important. And so we've really dialed up all of our donor stewardship practices. I'm grateful for our development team internally, who has helped really build those materials to make it easy for folks to reach out to donors, to supporters, to let them know how much their support has had an impact on their community at this time, and give them opportunities to really experience that. And also then getting board members to actually make those phone calls and those kinds of connections is so very important. And I think without being able to gather in person, there's real opportunity to engage folks in content, and people are hungry for that. And so that was what we were thinking about as we were framing the event. How can we turn it into an opportunity to tell a story that we couldn't tell if we had 350 people in a room who, you have a difficult time getting a crowd quiet, but when you have a truly captive audience and folks are sitting together at their computers, even if they're engaging in something together, there's a real opportunity to share and to teach and to connect. And I think really focusing on building that has been key to our success with our virtual event and with our fundraising in general.
Great, thank you.
I think,
Can I add something, Adam? Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to make a comment about Adam's perspective. The key to all of this is the fundamentals on how we work with donors hasn't changed. If anything, we need to be more disciplined around how we thank folks, how we execute our mission and serve our clients, how we communicate message, and using all the various forms that we communicate messages. Social media is free, as a platform, but the work around it and the work to maximize it isn't free. And so really using the science and the discipline to present our messages through these different platforms and vehicles becomes even more important now than it's ever been.
Great, thank you, Steve. Can I ask each of you, what are the size of your teams? And then later on, we'll kind of get into whether or not you had to enlist anyone additional to support you. But in general, what's the size of your team that really helped to execute these activities?
So we are a small but mighty team here at Ywca, and candidly, there was only about maybe 4 of us that were actively engaged in the process. But one of the things that we're truly blessed with is having an incredible amount of volunteers who step up. I mean, we have thousands of people who enlist themselves to be able to help us in all capacities. That includes our board, that included the host committee, and we had just an incredible amount of people step up to help us really plan it and execute it in what I will say was a almost flawless fashion.
Excellent.
Same here, small but mighty. Between our marketing and development, we have 5 of us, plus a consultant to assist with event management. But we got it done.
And I'll echo that. Small but mighty on our team. We are 2 staff that were fully enlisted in this event, and strong support from our executive director and from our board and host committee. And I will say also, one of the real keys to success with Harvest Ball at Home was a really strong chair, a volunteer who's not a board member or general committee member, but a community volunteer who cares very much about the work and was really instrumental to its success. So we didn't enlist any external contracted support for event production beyond AV, but that network of support was really significant for us.
Awesome. And so thinking about the strategies and the tactics that you employed, what was your participation rate compared to when it was actually in person? So did you have more? Did you have about equal? Did you have less?
So when we actually made the decision to go virtual, we had to take in a lot of elements. And one of those key elements is, I mean, let's just face it, in March and April and May, there started this new trend called Zoom fatigue. And so a lot of people are jumping on meetings. A lot of people are engaged in these things for 7, 8, 9, in some cases, 10 hours a day. And we wanted to be very mindful of that. And so when we started strategizing around what would make the most sense in terms of really converting a live event into a virtual event, we consulted with our host committee. So we're talking with business professionals, donors, and supporters of the organization, and we parsed it all down to 30 minutes. We kept everything mission focused. We wanted to make sure that we can talk about what it is that we do and why we do it, and minimize the amount of talking heads. And so in a live audience, we would typically have anywhere from 450 to 500 attendees. By identifying the right date and time and the amount of time, and not charging people tickets to actually participate, at least in our event, our virtual event, we actually ended up with somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 plus people. And those were unique visitors to the actual virtual event. We also put together packages that allowed people to have what we call miniature host committees. We wanted to make sure we were staying within the state guidelines around groups gatherings, you know, keeping those groups really tight with families and close friends. And so that's not really counting all of those people that might have been in some of those host committee settings. So we actually had a really great showing in support of the organization that Saturday evening at 7:30, which we had come to learn ended up being a really good time slot for people to help support Ywca.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of understanding your target market and understanding how to, again, pivot so that you can be successful. So I think that was great that you found the right time in response to those particular needs. Anyone else want to share what their participation was comparatively to last year?
Sure. I would say our total number of attendees was lower. but that was largely the product of fewer corporate sponsorships because of the timing for when we made the decision to actually transition the event from in-person to virtual. A lot of the time when we would normally be doing our heaviest outreach to potential corporate sponsors was during the big portion of the shutdown, when there was so much uncertainty, both financially for a lot of corporate partners and just in terms of schedules. No one knew what to expect for fall. And so being sensitive to that, we really dialed back some of that outreach and focused more on bringing individuals together. And each ticket was designed to for a couple. People who purchased a ticket actually purchased a meal kit, and that was a meal for two. And so in terms of the number of couples that purchased, we had 150 tickets that were distributed that way, most of which were purchased by people who were choosing to attend the event rather than attending with sponsor tickets that were included as a portion of the sponsorship. So that was definitely similar to what we've done historically relative to ticket sales, and meant that everyone who attended was really excited about the event and had really made the decision to attend it. And we did ours on a Friday evening, and that seemed to work well for folks.
Great, thank you.
Can I just add, the beauty also of having a virtual fundraiser, at least it has been for us, is that we have provided the actual full recording of the event after the fact to our sponsors and some of our ticket purchasers. So even if they weren't able to attend at the actual live time of the event, we've seen a lot of viewing afterward. So we, like, for example, Women of Achievement, we had over 1,200 people logged in. We know some people were in groups, but if you look at our YouTube video viewing, it's about 600 more. So, I mean, it continues to grow. So that is also a benefit. We can then broaden our reach too. So that has been a good thing.
That's perfect, Jessica. Thank you for moving us to our next topic. So obviously the most critical component of a successful virtual fundraiser is the technology. So let's talk a little bit about how you needed to think through your priorities. What were the priorities that you essentially established for your particular tech?
I'll jump in if you don't mind.
Yes.
So when we started planning Women of Achievement, it was before the pandemic, because it's like starts now basically in the year, and then it takes place the next year. And we had already started, we'd already done recording of some of the videos and so forth. So we had to make the decision a month before the actual event to postpone. And when we talked about going virtual, we basically set goals. So most of our fundraising had already been done. So that our fundraising was not our goal at that point. However, we knew we wanted to make sure that, one, our sponsors were properly honored, but even more that the people who were being, the Women of Achievement who were being honored, got that same crowd feeling, that spirit of Women of Achievement. So it was really important to us when we chose our platform that we could have a cheering section. So Zoom was our choice because of that. And the chat section, I think, really brought the event together. I would say we use Mills James. Speaking of technology, Mills James, I can't say enough good things about them. We pre-recorded most of our event, which is also, we highly recommend that. That way you don't run into any issues. But they said that as far as the chat box, they had never seen as many people participate in the chat box as they had in Women of Achievement. So I think we accomplished that goal. We wanted to make sure those women felt special. So we tried to ensure that we did that through virtual.
Yeah, great. What
So
about
much
you? You talked a little bit about trying to really condense and, you know, convert from live to digital. So what were you all thinking through?
So much like Jessica and the team over at the Y, I will tell you that a lot of the elements that we had to take in consideration was not only the production, but then the ease of use for those who are supporting us and how they can actually make their contributions or engage in the live auction elements, et cetera. So production wise, we were fortunate enough to have Mills James as well via Safe Light. So one of our key partners who said, hey, listen, we want to make sure that we can help you provide a quality component because the reality is we know that as much as we want to say our internet connectivity is going to be great, you never know, right? In the moment, it can get really, really spotty. And so we wanted to make sure that we could put on something that would be polished, that would allow for our sponsors and our viewers to feel like they were really a part of the experience. And so much of our element was also pre-recorded, and it gave a lot of our participants who did have some speaking roles in there an opportunity to just share their message and for us to be able to paint the picture of who we are, what we do, and why we've been doing this amazing work for the last 25 years and plan on doing it for as long as we possibly can, which means another 100 plus years or more. And so when we think about that, we also said, how do we make it easier for those who are viewers to be able to provide their financial support to the organization? And we use a platform called Givergy. And so it allows for the auction elements to take place. It allows for people to make their donations. They can do these things in real time. There's text elements, there are email elements, whatever you feel the most comfortable with in terms of staying connected to how you want to make your contributions. It was all there. And so that night of, for us, we ended up seeing, because much like Jessica and Adam mentioned, we had a much broader attendance because we had people even outside of the Columbus, Ohio market who were engaged in this and wanting to support us and support the mission of the organization. And we ended up doubling the amount of money we raised on the auction in comparison to prior year because it was easy for them and they could see it in real time, the impact that they were having. So those two elements from a technology perspective, I think really benefited us. And we know this is here to stay in some fashion going forward.
If I can ask you all, Adam, I'll start with you. Is there one feature within technology that you wish was different, wish that you had that could help you better serve?
Sure. We worked with a different platform from what my colleagues have described. We worked with a platform called Remo, which is really designed to be very, very interactive. So when folks enter the event, they actually enter a virtual ballroom, and within that space, there are tables. And at those tables, guests are seated, and you have an opportunity to sit down at the table and enter what essentially is a Zoom video conversation with the other guests at the table. And that was really significant for us because it meant that we were able to have that kind of person-to-person connection that that folks were missing from live events, that when you can't do a live event. So everything that we did was live, with the exception of a couple of very, very brief pre-recorded elements that were presented during the program. And we transitioned in between that conversation mode and presentation mode pretty seamlessly. And that was something that we were really looking for. The one thing I will say that I wish were different is that that platform is a fantastic one. I would certainly recommend it, but it's specialized. It operates in a web browser, but is new for a lot of people. And so that was something that when you told guests that, here's how you access the event, you go to the link, they say, is that a Zoom? And it's like, no, it's not a Zoom. It's a lot like Zoom, but it's a little different. And here's how. And I think we underestimated the amount sort of intimidating that would be for some guests. And, not having an ability to do that really personal interaction in a platform that people are using every day. We talk about Zoom fatigue, but it's really familiar now. And not using that was in some ways a barrier to people feeling comfortable. That being said, I don't think I would do it differently if I were to do it again, at least in terms of choosing the platform. I would just know even more so that we need to get up front with messaging, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like.
Got it.
From my
It's funny you
standpoint,
say that Zoom is very familiar. We're still telling people that they're on mute. So maybe we need to transition. Anyone else have a perspective on something they think or wish was different
sure.
about the technology?
This is Steve. I'll add a comment. One of I feel the biggest challenges about technology is the lack of the ability to create the networking environment that was with all of the live person events. And so that networking was with donors, it was with colleagues, it was with sponsors. And so moving forward, I think figuring out a way to create hybrid events that allow for some of that networking, but still present sort of a safe space and a focus on the message is going to be even more critical. The other challenge is, we're presenting platforms and things that are more sophisticated that have a cost. Figuring out ways that smaller nonprofit organizations that have even smaller staff than what we're sharing here is going to be critical to sort of even the playing field for all the organizations that want to take part in these kinds of events.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Let's talk about going forward. So the future. Oyauma, you said it perfectly. You said this is here to stay. We're probably not going to transition away from this, at least in the next 6 to 9 months. So what do 2021 fundraisers look like within each of your organizations, especially knowing that you've got one under your belt and there are some learnings that you have taken. So share with me a little bit about what 2021 looks like from a fundraising standpoint.
So yeah, I echo everything that Stephen shared. There is that networking element that we all would love to be able to get back into. And fundamentally, coming into 2021, we have to understand, at least for the first half of the year, chances are many of the events and functions that we're going to plan are probably going to be virtual in some format. We may start seeing more of the hybrid models towards the latter part of Q2, maybe into Q3, Q4. But at the end of the day, if we're doing our part in all of this, we're at least trying to make sure we're doing the right thing and providing the best avenues. And I will tell you some of the feedback that we received from some of our corporate partners. Some of them actually were okay with not having to put on their tuxedo for the evening and could actually enjoy supporting us in their homes with their loved ones in whatever fashion they so choose. And so at the end of the day, there was something crisp about that. And the other piece is what we come to learn is when they made their contributions to the organizations, as most of us know, if there's anything that they receive in return, that cost of the meal, et cetera, well, guess what? That part's not tax deductible. But in a virtual element, most of that, if not all of that contribution just now became tax deductible for them. So they saw some benefits to this. And many of them even said, hey, listen, we love to find ways in which we can continue to engage in this in some capacity, because much like what Jessica and Adam shared, this was all recorded. This was now out there living in the social media world. So people outside of Columbus, for at least for our organization, they're hearing about us and they're learning about us. And we actually received donations from outside of this market that totaled a pretty decent amount from people who just saw it secondhand and said, this is incredible. So the audience just now got bigger and became a much more, I would say, thoughtful opportunity when we think about fundraising elements in 2021.
Oh yeah, I shared that my favorite part was actually getting dressed up. So I think you all should also incorporate that people should wear their ball gowns while they're watching virtually. Can everybody?
We'll start that as a new challenge. That's right.
Jessica, you're gonna add?
Oh yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what Oyauma said. And beyond that, with it broadening the reach, that's a benefit for our sponsors as well, that their name attached to the event is broadened. When we look at our future, we've been speaking to our major sponsors to figure out, what they're comfortable with. What do you think makes sense for 2021? And the feedback we've received as well is love being able to come as you are and feeling comfortable with wearing your sweats to events. So sorry about the no ball gowns, but stretchy pants are here to stay.
Yeah, and I will say, I think that for us, the real highlight was the opportunity to have people engaging in the kind of work that we do every day. I mean, we teach virtual cooking classes to partners across the city on a daily basis. That's a key part of our work, and we provide the food for people to do that. So everyone's getting the same meal kits, and we're cooking them together from our kitchen, and we do that over a Zoom webinar just like this one. And the opportunity to really give people that hands-on experience with the work. And granted, the food was different and a little more festive because it was for a party. It was a really hands-on experience with the work. And that's something that as a development professional is the best way to help a donor connect with the cause and really inspire them to give and to give generously. And so I think there's a lot that we can take from this to inspire our work moving forward, even when it is an option to gather in person. And our events in September is typically held in September. So we'd be looking at fall 2021. And I think there's still too much uncertainty to know whether we will attempt to plan anything in person for that time. But I think I don't want to give up the opportunity to have people really experience something like they did during Harvest Ball at home, and to do that with people from across the country. Like I was really excited because my family, who lives out of town, was able to attend Harvest Ball for the first time, and I connected with them there, and my daughter got to see her grandparents, and that was a lot of fun. And they cooked along with us, and I know a lot of board members did the same thing. They were seated at their virtual tables with family that they haven't been able to see in person, and that's really wonderful, and something that I think people want to share causes that they're passionate about, even if they're not in the same physical place. And giving an opportunity to do that is definitely not something I would change, and will be a part of our planning moving forward as we can help. Just think about people often talk about the fundraisers toolbox. It's yet another tool for the toolbox, and one that I think has benefits besides just being a substitute for something that we wish we could be doing in person.
So one thing that I'll add to that, if I could really quick, which is it will require us as leaders and as fundraisers to think about our targets and our plans and our strategies and our budgets when it comes into when we go into 2021 in relationship to what do we think we're actually going to raise from the virtual events, because we know some have been extremely successful and able to achieve their goals. And that's a far few in between number. And most are happy to be able to hit about 50% of their planned goal going into these virtual events. We saw what the Columbus Foundation was able to achieve with the Big Give. I mean, it's incredible the amount of people who want to come out and be able to support. For us as an organization, because we also at Ywca were able to reduce our expenses associated with the virtual event, we saw actually an increase in the net income associated with our timeout gala. Now, we didn't achieve our goal. We came in at about 92% in terms of our gross, but our net was much higher this year than it was last year, simply because we didn't have all that expense element that we traditionally would, and the generosity of some of our partners to ensure that we could have the proper sort of setup with a company like Mills James to be able to produce this event.
I'll just add all these comments resonate with me. Tactics may change, but the core strategies of why we do these events are going to stay the same. And in many ways, I felt the focus on the events and attendance may have actually taken some of our organizations away from these core strategies, which is connecting people to our mission. In all these conversations, we really are talking about annual fundraising. What we haven't talked about is how we use these events to create emotional connection that may generate plan giving opportunities for our organizations. So that's an important piece to add. I think the virtual events will be something that stays with us. I'd like to see a move toward virtual stewardship events. Again, things that are allowing us to connect with donors outside of that ask, but still reinforcing that connection to the organization. So I think the future, this has definitely created opportunities for us to rethink tactics and present our missions in ways that resonate with our donors in a more impactful way.
Thank you for that, Steve. I think one of my favorite things about the pivot is things like what Adam did. You know, how do you bring the actual experience to someone in their home? So, you know, I'm looking forward to all the creativity that organizations will be able to institute in order to continue to make this greater and greater. So congratulations to all of you. And thank you, Steve, for your input. We're going to move now to Q&A. So hopefully you got all your questions into the Q&A box. The first question really relates to some of what Oyauma just talked about, which is, what are your budgets versus your actuals on the virtual events? What are your budgets versus your actuals? Adam, you want to start?
Sure. So we, with Harvest Ball this year, we really weren't sure what budgets should look like. We knew that we certainly wanted ticket sales to cover any, more than cover any direct expenses, and hoped to have raffles and the one auction item we were doing perform similarly to or better than they have in the past. And they did all of that. And for us, the focus really was on the fund a need and how to create that moment to really inspire people to give and to dig deep in doing so. And we set a really ambitious goal for the fund a need to meet our goal from the previous year, when we had a much larger group and we're able to raise over almost $80,000 for the organization. And so we set that goal and for the fund a need alone. And we far eclipsed that during the virtual event. And it was really inspiring to see how generous people were during that moment. So we raised over $93,000 during the fund a need. And that's much more than we've ever done during that moment. And many of those were significant upgrades from individuals who've contributed before and some new donors who've been supporters in other ways in the past, but never really made that step to making a major gift. Our net was slightly lower than our most recent in-person event. The Harvest Ball that we hosted in person last year net about $145,000. But a lot of that was corporate sponsorship revenue that this year we had a number of corporate sponsors who, even those who came in, elected to allocate those funds to programs. So rather than to event support. And so it didn't include that recognition. It didn't end up in that total, but it was still support for the organization for the year. Overall, the net revenue for Harvest Ball was just over $120,000 this year, and consistent with what you would expect of a virtual event versus an in-person event, even providing food for guests, because it was a cook-along. We had some prepared food and we had some ingredients for people to prepare a meal together. So there was a real cash outlay associated with that, but again, much less than it would be for an in-person event. Expenses were 15% of total budget. So it was significantly lower than a traditional in-person event where you're looking at something closer to 25 to 30.
Awesome, thank you. Jessica, you want to share?
I don't know exact numbers as far as percentages, but we definitely netted more for both of our events that we've put on.
Okay.
Because we didn't have the food expenses like Oyauma was talking about, or the venue, etc. We have more videos through Mills James. However, the cost was definitely down.
Okay. Awesome. Talk to me a little bit about how you all have involved your board members in this process. You know, Oyauma talked a lot about volunteers. I believe Adam did too. So how did you incorporate them in this, you know, journey?
I'm happy to kick that off. Our board was incredibly supportive of the transition to the virtual event, and we tried to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. So we provided a toolkit with sample email language, social media posts, things they could copy and paste and personalize to send out to their networks to encourage folks to buy tickets to join them at the event. And many did so. And for those who had a significant number of guests coming, we sort of allocated tables in the virtual space for them. And it was an open, very open platform. So anyone who wanted to could sit at one of the tables, but board members who had tables named, folks would know where to find them. Their guests would know where to find them, so they could all be on that video chat together. And it was really a choose your own adventure kind of experience for guests. And so we tried to do as much as we could to let board members know what that experience would look like. So they had the toolkit to use for actually publicizing the event and selling tickets to the event. They had sort of an FAQ that talked about what the event experience was going to be like. So when their guests or potential guests said, hey, I'm happy to join you for this thing, but what's it actually going to be? They had a tool to do that. And then we did a pre-event orientation to the platform itself. So everyone got on a Zoom call and we walked them through some screenshots of what the platform looks like, talked to them about how to navigate that so they could really be ambassadors for that and answer any questions that folks might have during the event itself. So we had a lot of really hands-on support for them. And I think one thing that we've learned about virtual events is there can't be too much. It's really a messaging challenge to give folks a sense for what to expect, and over communication is probably the right amount of communication.
Yeah. And similarly, we did the same, the toolkit, we did a promotion kit for all of our board members and committee members. And then we also, because especially for a Women of Achievement event, that chat box was really important that our honorees felt like they were being cheered on. We did give our board members kind of a outline of what our chat moderator was planning and like little key points of where to chime in and add to the chat box.
Awesome, thank you.
What I've seen that I've really enjoyed is for the events that have pre-recorded portions, more of a willingness to use clients, community members, and board members that may not have had a speaking role in a live event participate, which has really been able to really push mission and create, I think, stronger emotional connections with the work of those organizations.
Great, thank you, Steve. All right, so I've got another question for Adam, and then also the rest of the group. But Adam, the people want you to talk more about Givergy, and then Oyauma and Jessica, if I can have you start thinking about your virtual fundraising tech too, we'll follow up and have you answer about that. But Givergy, let's start there.
Well, Givergy is actually Oyama's. So I'll let him take, if we've got a Givergy question, I'll let him take that, and then I'll talk about Remo.
Sorry.
Yeah, so two different platforms, and with Givergy, it is truly just an online platform that allows you to customize how people interact with you, the messaging that you're able to push out. There's an auction element, There's a raffle element. There is a donor or a donation element. There's links that allow you to be able to share additional videos, connectivity for information. It's fairly reasonable. I know Steve, he had mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the smaller nonprofits. The great thing about Givergy is they're willing to work with any nonprofit, any given size. And so I think there's a great opportunity there for anyone that's interested in trying to utilize that level of a platform. The texting, the emailing, the engagement of information keeps people real time with everything that's going on.
Great. All right, now it's on you, Adam.
Okay. So the platform that we used for the event itself was called Remo, and I saw a couple of requests to spell that. It's REMO, and that's a platform that needs to be managed by an outside AV partner. It's not one that someone can sort of purchase a license to in any kind of efficient way. So we worked with Platinum TDM as our AV company, and they have the relationship with Remo that they were able to get us up and running in the system and sort of customize it to meet our needs. And so those virtual ballroom spaces, they have the tables with the chats, and it's really, people can choose where they want to be. There's a text chat option, there's the video option, and people can engage with that sort of as much or as little as they want. And during presentation portions of the event, everyone's pulled out of their video chats and they see what looks like a webinar. And then when that portion is over, people go back to their tables, and you can bounce between tables and talk to different groups. And that's something that I know a lot of folks did, and that ability to connect with people was really nice. I will say our event was significantly longer than either Jessica or Oyama's. We were 2.5 hours online, and most folks did stay for that entire event. And there were 3 program portions, each of which was broken up with some unstructured time, and you know, people were cooking and eating along during that whole time. And so it was a slightly longer experience. And then for all of the giving and for our auction, we used our CRM. We have a ticketing extension for the CRM that we use, which is Neon. And so we sold tickets that way, we sold raffle tickets that way, and then we just used a standard sort of event specific donation link so we could track them as a donation campaign for contributions during the Fund a Need. So people either did that, you know, we had the link in the chat box and a couple of other places on the website, so, or on the event platform. So folks just did that way.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And then other technology we use, we did do a Facebook fundraiser leading up to our Women of Achievement event on what would have been Women of Achievement, just to, again, keep that spirit alive. We had a match sponsor, it was our 35th anniversary, so that was helpful as well. And then during the event, we did text to give through Qtego, which is just, yeah, your basic text to give. And then we use Online Express. It's a product through Blackbaud for ticket purchases for both our Activists and Agitators event and our Women of Achievement event.
Okay. Jessica, did you also use or infuse client relationship management software in your fundraising tactics? So CRM for those who abbreviate?
Yes. Yeah, we use Razor's Edge. So that works with our what's it called? Email system, and it kicks out emails for us.
Awesome. Oyama, are you going to add?
No, I think I did say something that came across about ticket sales, and candidly, it's up to you and your nonprofit organization whether you believe that that's going to be an avenue for you or not. Obviously, a tremendous success for our friends over at Local Matters and others. But again, keeping in mind, what's your platform, as Stephen mentioned, what's the mission? What exactly are people going to come and receive in exchange for their $25 or their $150 or their $1,000? And candidly, from our perspective, as we kind of noodle this around, unless you are providing something that is extremely, extremely unique that would compel someone to want to purchase a ticket, then what exactly are they going to receive in return? Then why not just make it an open forum and allow them to come in and increase the chances that they'll likely just make a donation to you? And that was one of the things that we saw, is that the messaging was compelling enough that people just said, you know what, I love what I'm hearing, I love what I'm seeing. And the number of donors went up for that evening. And again, we could have charged individual tickets, but a lot of this was done through our sponsors. And then the night of, via auctions and donations, is how we started to see things continue to climb.
Thank you. Let's actually keep on that subject. So Jessica or Adam, how did you come to the conclusion to actually charge or to not charge ticketing prices, registration fees?
So I'll jump in then. So for our Women of Achievement, like I mentioned, most of our fundraising had already been done. So we decided not to charge for anybody else who wanted to attend. We asked our sponsors to share broadly with as many people as they wanted, which was nice. And then for activists and agitators, it was a little bit different because we were providing racial equity training. So we wanted it to be accessible to all people because it is so important right now. But at the same time, we wanted people to have some buy-in, because if you sign up for something and it's free, you don't feel as invested to attend. So we wanted to make sure that people actually came to the event. So what we did was we did a $20 ticket price, and then we had an option to apply for a scholarship. And then our event host sponsorship level, it's a $2,500 level. Part of the benefits was that you were sponsoring 5 scholarship attendees. So that's how we got around it and got more people in attendance.
Great.
And we did a pretty standard ticket sale. Couples tickets were $150 for general admission or $225 for a VIP. The main difference between general admission and VIP is that those were delivered. The VIP were delivered, and we leaned heavily on our staff and volunteers to get those deliveries done, and were able to sell out tickets. I think could have sold more if we'd had the ability to produce a larger volume of food, but we really weren't sure whether that was going to be compelling enough that people would buy tickets. So because it was conceived originally as a virtual event, we knew that ticket sale, those ticket sale revenues were going to be a significant portion of what would make the event work, because we had out-of-pocket expense for the food. And we always talk at Local Matters, we don't want to talk about food and talk about cooking without people having a chance to eat together. And so that was a real priority for us. And so people were receiving a tangible thing as part of that. And I will say, I've seen a couple questions in the Q&A. That box included a pre-made appetizer, a pre-made side dish, and then ingredients for sort of individually packaged ingredients for a main dish that people would prepare together. And then we worked with local restaurants to purchase desserts. So we were able to support a couple of small bakeries in town as well as part of that. So all of that was included in the package, and people cooked along together. So that main dish looked a lot like if you ordered a Blue Apron kit or something like that. So it was a lot of work on our end to get that all out the door. And we really, for us, that ticket sale component was something that was going to be significant to making the event work on a revenue basis.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had to do too was make sure that we could provide benefits to our sponsors. And so much like what Local Matters did, we actually put together some kits, charcuterie boards with all kind of goodies. And then Middle West Spirits, we also had some pre-mixed cocktails that we had available. We checked everybody's ID. And so with that being the backdrop, our sponsors were able to receive those kits as a thank you, much to what Stephen had mentioned earlier, but it also helped them with their hosting at their particular party. Again, it wasn't an element where we sold that separately. This was more or less something that we wanted to do as a thank you for our sponsors who had already stepped up and wanted to make sure that we can continue to push forward the mission. And it's been a fan favorite that's been asked for. Again, I think I saw somewhere in there, someone asked, are we doing this again in 2021? There will be some level of a hybrid, yes.
All right, so the people want to know more about marketing. So Jessica, I know you talked a lot about social media. Let's start specifically with, how did you reach some new audiences? So obviously digital, virtual allows you to connect essentially to everywhere, but what are some specific tactics you use to connect with new people?
We reach out to some of the influencers in Columbus who have a lot of followers, and that's helpful. Then we've done that for each year, especially for our activists and agitators event, people who are dedicated to social justice issues and women issues. So that, I feel like that really helps. They do, in previous years, I think we did giveaways as well, but we didn't have any goods this year, so nothing to give away.
Okay. Anyone else have a new unique tactic that they use to reach new audiences?
I mentioned we worked with a couple of local restaurants and bakeries on both the appetizers. We worked with Willoughby's Soul Veg, and we worked with Lifestyle Vegan Cafe. Everything we served at the event was plant-based, by the way. And so we did a lot of outreach within the vegan community in Central Ohio, just to raise awareness of the event. And our cooking demonstration was co-led by our executive director, Michelle Moskowitz-Brown, and her sister, Isa Chandra Moskowitz. And Isa is a very well-known cookbook author and vegan restaurateur. And so I think there was an opportunity for messaging sort of the celebrity of the celebrity appearance during the cooking along portion. I will say, though, we did a lot of really conventional outreach as well with a small host committee and the board member outreach that I mentioned earlier. Getting folks there was important and was done similarly to as it would have been for an in-person event.
So for us, from a marketing, I'll say a tactic per se, is I think everybody that's either participating or on this panel will know you cannot take your standard in-person gala and try to convert that into a virtual gala. The elements don't always align. So you're going to have to find the best way to take the best of an in-person gala and put it into a virtual gala. And for us, part of it was the mystery around any special announcements or anything that could ultimately be coming up. And when we started pushing that message, we had more people wanting to engage with us to find out, well, what's the big announcement? Who's the new big partner, whatever the case may be. And that intrigue was enough for people to keep wanting to find out more about not only the organization, but to be there in person the evening of, or I should say virtually in person, the evening of, in order to be able to really push it. So keep in mind, if we already know what your script is, probably not nearly as exciting. But if you know that there are going to be elements in there that you're going to be able to excite people around, and you can get that out via social media, and everybody's talked about this too, which is utilizing some of the celebrity status of the influencer, the social bloggers, the athletes, the celebrities out there that can also tag your information, because chances are they have 50,000 or 5 million followers who will now know about what it is that you do and want to tune in.
Awesome. Okay. There's a question that came through to elaborate a little bit more about how you engage corporate sponsors. Jessica, I know you mentioned that was critically important for the success of your event, but how did you actually engage them beyond, making sure that they were represented properly? So I know, Oyauma, you also talked, or excuse me, Adam, I think you talked about some chat groups, but fill us in a little bit more about how you engage corporate sponsors.
We also gave them promotion kits to share with their network, and they each got commercial opportunities. So it was a little bit different than having 4 people. Typically, especially for our presenting sponsors, we have 4 people on stage each speaking. So in this case, they each got their own video to represent how they wished, represent their company and the connection to our event as they wish. So it gave them a little bit more freedom to share how they would like.
Awesome.
And our corporate sponsors did receive meal kits as a benefit, and the sort of standard promotion as associated with the marketing of the event. And we've also, just because there was less of an in-person opportunity, transitioned some of that recognition to programmatic recognition as well. So, you know, what would have normally been an event benefit has become an event benefit plus that program piece. And that really allows for a more year-round benefit opportunity, marketing benefit opportunity, and stewardship opportunity. So really helping folks recognize, here's what your support did during the event, and here's how it contributed to the success of that event, and here's what that looks like in a classroom or in a garden, and how it lives throughout the year. So that's been really significant for us. And though corporate sponsorships were a smaller portion of the events budget, they remain a big focus for us, just in terms of how we maintain those relationships and steward those dollars and help them recognize the impact of their support.
Okay. All right, this is our last question. So talking about the future of events again, what components of the virtual fundraising would you keep, and what parts would you move back to in-person or switch to a hybrid? I'll give you some Jeopardy music.
So, you know, for us, we have built a little bit of a following around our auction. So at the end of the day, the silent auction has become a nice piece of how we raise funds as an organization, and we will always keep that element. We will always keep that bidding war process going, because people get really excited about being able to support the organization in that. What we found to be a bit of a challenge, and maybe others have figured this out, is a live auction component. And as much as you want people to have their paddles up and be able to bid against each other, gets a little convoluted on a Zoom screen of 200 or 100 people and trying to make sure, well, who in the what's-its, as we like to call it, right? So at the end of the day, that's the one piece that we did not include. And that came down to some final decisions, literally a couple of weeks right before we executed our event, that we pulled that component out and made everything just truly a silent auction. We know that in person, we have a number of donors who really do love that element. They love that ability to be able to help build funding elements for the organization. So it's here to stay. Silent auction.
Anything?
I found with the digital events, there's a level of intimacy around talking about mission, and more variety on who you can use through pre-taping to talk about mission, that I find to be very compelling. I'd like to see that stay. I'd also like to see sort of an increase in the use of sort of different stewardship events around the digital piece that I find really attractive. I do miss the networking, and I miss the piece about, for events where you're honoring people, being able to actually in person say a congrats or give a hug. That physical intimacy is very important in celebrating our champions, and I'd like to see that come back.
Agreed with that. If we were to do a hybrid, we definitely would keep in mind that our honorees, they want their family to be there to cheer them on. And how do we successfully and safely do that? But we also have found that we really do like that accessibility piece of having an online event. So I think when Oyauma is talking about a hybrid for them is here to stay, I think it's definitely something we will be keeping in mind.
Agreed here. I think the opportunity to have the attention and to really do the storytelling is such an important piece, and much harder in a large in-person gathering. So I think focusing on that for sort of hybrid or virtual opportunities or for smaller gatherings will be really important. But, you know, I did miss the crowd. And though we did have an opportunity to network at tables and to have folks experience the work during that cook-along portion, I think that in-person connection is something that we all miss. And it's a huge part of what I love about this work is connecting with the people who love this work. And that's something that can't really be replaced in the virtual format in quite the same way, and will be something we look forward to having return with hybrid or in-person events in the future. Thank you, Adam.
All right, group, thank you so much for your insights. Wonderful information. I think a lot for everyone to build on. I'm going to kick it back over to Danielle, who will close out the forum.
Thank you so much for joining us for this forum. I really appreciate all the engaging questions that you had. It really enriched the information. Thank you so much to each of our panelists and to you, Jonica, for ushering us through this conversation seamlessly. Thank you. Bye, everyone.